Welcome back, everyone. My name is Ben Shenoy, and welcome back to another TR2050 panel discussion. And we're having this session in the Swiss Re Center for Global Dialogue. And in fact, we're coming back to the center because our very first panel discussion was in this very room 3 years ago in 2023. Since then, we've had a number of panel discussions around the world in London, Dubai, Stockholm, and Boston. And what we'll be doing in today's session is looking at what's changed over the last 3 years since our very first panel discussion. And to go back to the purpose of TR2050, what we're contrasting is the difference between the change in work, what's changing around work in terms of roles, how we reward people in the context of changing roles, capabilities, and skills, and contrasting that with a very fixed, stable set of reward systems with linear roles and steady jobs. And this is what we're looking to change. TR2050 is a practitioner-led global platform of leading reward experts, academics, and innovators from around the world. So we're in Europe. We also have been running labs in Asia-Pac and in the Americas. And we're trying to go beyond, we're not a consultancy. We're trying to go beyond just a think tank and moving from talking to action. How do we do this? We do this through structured experimentation. And it's a structured process of assumptions, examining our assumptions, testing our hypotheses, moving to tests, where we gather data and evidence. And this moves us from ideas to evidence of what actually works in such a fast-moving world. And we use this evidence to test our ideas and deliver against commercial scrutiny from senior leaders. That's the purpose of TR2050. And now what I'd like to do is introduce our panel for today. I'm going to start with Olaf Lang. Olaf, again, thank you very much for hosting us here 3 years on from our very first conversation. Olaf is the Global Head for Reward at Swiss Re. I'm going to move around now. Next to me is Alex Kaufmann. Alex is the Global Head of Reward for Medartis. Next to Alex is Uwe Kilian. Uwe is the Vice President for Compensation and Benefits and Labor Relations at Essity. Raluca is sitting next to Olaf. Raluca Ciliacu-Hetzer, my apologies, is Senior Vice President for HR and Global Total Rewards at Callebaut Group. And finally on the end there is Marc Glaeser. Marc is Head of HR for a division within Lonza called Specialized Modalities Platform. So welcome all of you. Thank you very much for being here with me today. So let's start our discussion. As I said, our main theme is what's changed since 2023. And I know some of you were here, some of you were not. Let's start, Olaf, with you, because you will remember a long time ago we had the conversation. So let me start with that, Olaf, with you. Which assumptions in 2023 did we get wrong?
Well, it feels like a long time ago, Ben, exactly. If I look back at the discussions we had, I wouldn't say wrong assumptions, but I think what we underestimated is the speed of the technological development, which we've seen over the last couple of years. And in particular, the impact AI has on industries, on companies, on functions, on HR, and also on rewards. And at least in our company, Swiss Re, there's a certain expectation from the business that every unit deploys AI in its processes, in its routines, and in order to create significant efficiency gains. That we haven't seen 3 years ago, and I think we underestimated the speed with which that came.
Great. Thank you, Olaf. Marc, you were also in this room 3 years ago. So what are your thoughts on this question about what we got wrong or what we underestimated, perhaps?
Well, I think building on what Olaf has said, right, I think the technology certainly has moved. I think the other area where I see more progress is around the thoughts related to skills and how that relates back to also compensation and reward systems. So I think that, from my vantage point, I think is one of the key changes and shifts that we've undertaken. I think the element where we focused significantly, if I recall correctly, 3 years ago, was around gigs, and the change also of the composition of our workforce at that stage. And I think to be fair, up to now, we've not had that progress that I think all of us anticipated 3 years ago.
Right. If it's changing, it's not changing as fast as we thought.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
I think technology certainly has changed significantly faster. Well, at that stage, I think we were anticipating the gig population to be significantly higher than I think we see it at present.
Great. Can I ask you just to expand a little bit on, so you said we made progress on skills. What have you noticed in terms of how we are wrestling with skills?
So I think listening to other organizations, I think there's a fair amount of investment in terms of understanding the skills that an organization has, or the skills that an organization may need. And from that, I think it becomes then also an HR topic, be it from a reward side, but also from a training development, etc. And I think it may, and this is maybe a hypothesis, is linked back also to the AI and the technological changes that are transpiring. And so organizations are trying to understand the skills that they have, but more importantly, given let's say the half-life of skills is increasing or decreasing in the sense that skills are becoming much faster obsolete. There is a need for organizations that are skill-based to understand how that is transpiring within their organization, right? Both in terms of the skills that they have within the organization, but more importantly also the skills that they are seeking from candidate pools, talent pools, or the relationships that they establish with, let's say, external sources of talent. And there, I think, comes then the nice link also to rewards, right? What does that mean? How do we reward a skill versus a job? How do we attract them? How do we also ensure that we, retain them as such?
Right. Great. Thank you. Raluca, what would you? And okay, you weren't here, but you were in the profession.
But I watched the video.
Yeah, you watched the video. Great. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, just beyond the two themes that you just mentioned, one thing that I took away from the video, there was a lot of conversation around individualizing and personalizing rewards. And I feel like that is one theme that has not materialized maybe to the extent it was discussed back then. And the background to it is probably around ease and also relevance, like to what extent, how far do you take personalization? What does that actually mean? How do you make it relevant? How do you make it actually sustainable, manageable? Within an organization is probably what has driven less of it materializing in reality, in my experience.
Right. And
I would agree to what Raluca said, because I think there is a certain tension between the two extremes, which is extreme simplicity and personalization. And whenever I talk to senior executives, their clear focus is keep it simple, so that people understand our programs and that, they can drive behavior and the like. And everything which adds complexity to the system, we try to avoid. And skills-based pay is one of those topics. I mean, that's almost a topic since I joined the industry some 30 years ago. Right. People were already talking about, shall we link compensation to skills? as you said, Raluca, I haven't seen much traction in the last 20 odd years. We're making a first step now to try to link skills to our job family framework. Whether that has an impact on compensation, pay ranges to be seen, but whatever we do, we want to avoid to add complexity to the already complicated reward system.
Great. Thank you.
What we might see,
Alex. Yeah.
thank you, what we might see as well is that companies that are not as far along on the skill journey can leverage quicker what companies who are further along have already done with the use of AI, sort of bringing them up to speed. And what I mean by that is that for a company like my own that is just starting to talk about the skills we need and how that maps into job families and how to structure our world of work, we're starting to ask ourselves, what skills do we need? Where do we start? And thankfully, because companies who have already asked themselves those questions have documented those in databases, we can then leverage those, with the use of AI and technology to map it to job descriptions we have and much quicker come up to speed. So it'll be interesting to see how many companies who are smaller, maybe not able to have evolved that thinking as quickly as others are able to catch up through the use of technology and close the gap.
A couple of interesting things here, right? One is learning from peers, other companies who've been further along the journey. Second thing is the tensions you're already articulating. You're being pulled in different personality versus simplification and simplicity, right? And then the final thing is around whether and this is a question, not a statement, right? Is it easier to manage complexity with technology? And do you want to do that?
I think it is, if I may respond to your point, Ben, I think it is easier to manage complexity with technology, but the other point is, do people still understand it if it's too complicated, regardless the management side of it? And my learning is that most line managers don't even understand basic reward concepts to the full extent. So if you make it too complicated,
Let alone some complicated highfalutin.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be manageable, but people don't get it.
And should you be allowing technology to manage complexity, or rather question yourself, is it already too complex? Let's take a look at it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, Marc.
Well, I think we need to maybe qualify technology, right? Because if I think back 3 years ago, we were probably looking at databases and sort of the worry around, in the administration of processes or the personalization, right? If we look at what the possibilities are, at least at this stage from AI, right? I think we are seeing AI being able to coach leaders. So if we spin this 2-3 years down the road, it may not just be general coaching, but it might be actually functional specific coaching, which would then go towards reward topics or more technical elements as well. If you're looking at data that is available or that an organization has, AI has a much easier and a better way of extracting that and bringing that to the forefront versus data models that one needed to have highly structured in the past. So I think AI hypothesis, let's put it this way, right, is maybe the disruptor that we've been waiting for, or the enabler for certain skills-based or other personalizations that in the past were just limited, but now we may have that leapfrog opportunity.
And going back to Olaf's and Alex's point, maybe, and again, hypothesis, and maybe there's an agent that can explain this to managers. Maybe, right? Possibly. Uwe, I want to bring you in.
Yeah, no. And I mean, I've been reflecting on what everyone's saying here, and maybe to come back to skills and technology at the same time. From my perspective, actually, I think it's changed a lot, because where we used to think about we're going to compensate for a specific skill, I don't think that companies are thinking that way anymore, actually, at the moment. I think as skills are changing so fast that we are starting to think about how do we deal with change adaptability. And that in itself is the skill, actually, that companies are looking for and compensating for potentially. And it goes a bit to technology because, as we said, I mean, there's more and more data coming in and almost overwhelming us. And it's the people who can deal with that actually, who can change with it, who can evolve with it. These are the people I think that almost everyone in every business actually wants to secure. And I think this is the interesting part for reward. That's why I think reward hasn't changed so much yet, because in the end, to your point, it's too complex to go for every skill. I mean, you can't maintain it. But when you start to think about, okay, now we're talking change adaptability, that's just one set of skills. So you can actually stay with quite a simple way of framing a compensation framework around that also. And I think this as reward professionals, this is what I grapple with every day when I think about it. How do I keep it simple, and what do I focus on reward actually? Where's the real value? Yeah, out of this. Maybe a bit overall, sorry.
No.
Absolutely. I really love what you're saying, Uwe, because I think this is indeed one of the reasons, in my view, why the traction hasn't been there for 20 years, like you said, Olaf, on like full-blown skills-based kind of pay structures and so on, because it's just too complex, too fragmented, right? Whereas what we're talking about now is identifying kind of core capabilities, core kind of skill sets that are required in an organization in a certain phase. And it may be super different in one organization but versus the other as well. And it will change. They will become commodity in 2 to 3 years maybe. But for a certain time being, you can flex your framework to reflect that particular need during that particular time.
And I like what you say in different organizations. I think it's different. And this is why, I mean, this is the value of reward also coming into it, because you have to read what your organization needs. And this is how you build your reward framework. There is no one framework that actually, like there's no wonder silver bullet that we can all use as a reward framework for organizations. The basics, of course, are the same for everyone, but I think then you have to tailor to your organization, to your culture, to the need in your organization for the skills. And that's actually where convened adds the value.
So the future value of reward professionals is being able to diagnose what your organization needs and then go to the toolkit and tune it to what your...
That's my view.
Yeah, okay, great. Brilliant discussion. I mean, it's interesting. You've wrecked my question guide here, because we've covered technologies, personalization, skills, but we'll come back to those topics. But thank you again. Brilliant discussion. Let's move on to another topic. So I said in my introduction, we in TR2050 obsess about ideas to evidence, right? So I want to ask you, what's changed in terms of what's gone from pipe dream to at least some evidence of things getting traction and making progress? Yeah. Alex, would you like to start us off?
Sure. This was my first TR2050. So I wasn't there 3 years ago.
Right.
But I can't imagine that you were sitting in the room we just spent the day in, dissecting a test actually done by one of our members.
Right.
And fast forward 3 years, we're actually putting into practice what you guys said we should be thinking about and doing and bringing to life. And that was for me really promising to actually see an example of that happening. And I also appreciated every time we started talking about any one of the various topics, whether that was skills or AI or even performance management, gig economy, it was always then pausing and reflecting, how can we turn this into something actionable? And granted, we often got lost in discussion, but we also then always came back to what is the problem we're at? What is our real problem here that we're asking? We love to talk about it and it's fun to explore, but what problem are we truly trying to solve? And how could we bring that into how we all kind of had ideas about how we then bring that to life in our organization, but through changing the way we manage performance or thinking about how we challenge the assumptions that we have today in and around the merit cycle,
Right.
or how merit cycle impacts performance, and coming actually to the conclusion that through these testing and through this challenging of each other and through the tests that Olaf and his company also, implemented, often coming to surprising conclusions. And I think that's sort of I thought was the most impressive part of today was kind of going, okay, we're really kind of, or even coming to the conclusion that actually we shouldn't spend too much more time talking about this topic, because maybe
we should focus our effort
we
elsewhere.
should focus our effort elsewhere, because we've kind of come to a dead end. And so very quickly saying, okay, this is set up to fail. Let's stop and spend our energy elsewhere. And honestly, pay transparency, which is one of the topics we decided to sort of put pause on. I won't say it's completely.
It's on hold for now.
It's on hold for now. But it was good to have that, to challenge each other on that, and to say, how important is this really, and how much time should we really be spending on this?
You won't be surprised to hear that this is music to our ears, because this is our obsession, right? Is going from talk to action. So thank you for that. And
That was my first impression.
and on record, we didn't bribe you, right?
Well, the coffee was exceptionally good, I have to say.
Okay, Uwe, since you are one of the members kind enough to share your experience of a test you ran, what's your take on this question?
I mean, I can only agree with it. I think the most value I got from this network actually is it makes you think and reflect, and that's what testing actually does. And it's always difficult to actually take the first step in a test, because you're a bit scared you might oversimplify, you're a bit worried actually it might look too simple, the answer's too simple. But to be very honest, I think that's also the value in a test. It's going through the methodologies of actually working with a small team of people around you to test the basic assumption that you think you actually know the answer to. And exactly to what you just said before, what comes out of it is often quite surprising. So you just get insights that you weren't expecting. And the insights you don't expect are the most valuable ones. So I mean, we discussed today a little bit about the link between merit and actually performance or sales outcomes. And then all of a sudden popped in leadership into this whole equation. And we weren't expecting it. We started to look at it, and now we're going to investigate it to see what is the impact actually of leadership on real sales outcomes for the organization. And I think you don't get to that if you don't take the time to play through it, to run a test, to be a bit courageous, to get feedback from the team. This is great to actually get the feedback, how to further test, how to actually bring it further. Maybe you start small, you then expand it, you actually scale it up. To me, that was always the biggest value of TR2050, I have to say.
And I think Olaf just said a really powerful word, courageous. Yes. Courageous. And I think we have to I was reflecting on that this morning, actually, in the train on my way here. One of the takeaways from the pre-reads was, why TR2050 was founded was because rewards hasn't changed in the last 50 years. And I asked myself, why is that? Because we have very visible, very demanding jobs. Our stakeholders can be challenging.
Yes.
And there's a lot of risk. We're talking about people's pay here. And I think it takes courage to challenge the status quo, and it takes courage to stand up in the face of what can be a challenging, difficult conversation, and to get buy-in from leaders, to create an environment where it's pulled from you, where it's needed. It takes courage to take those steps. So I was also very inspired by Olaf's ability to sort of say, okay, we're going to do this for our company. I mean, it's a good example of how we as reward leaders can be courageous, and what we can discover when we are courageous.
Great, thank you. Raluca, what's your thought on this?
So my thought is that it actually shows. Last time you guys were talking was there was a conversation around how difficult it is to actually change reward systems, because they have they're emotional. It's an emotional topic. High stakeholders, external, internal, employees, it's difficult to intervene and change. And the pilots we talked about, the tests we talked about, are a way to open the door, right? And kind of, yes, it takes courage, but it also takes a lot of intelligence to kind of understand, where do you start intervening? What could move the needle? And how can I start doing that without creating too much friction, right? Because you need buy-in for a test as well. You need buy-in for a pilot as well. So that to me is a very good example of one step, take that one step and it creates traction, and how we can apply it within rewards. It's fascinating.
Great. And I love your word intelligence, because there's a couple of aspects of it, right? One is intelligence about the system, the organizational system you're operating in. And then, of course, about behavior, because this, as you said, this is a very emotionally fraught topic, right? People really get invested in it. So thank you, Raluca. Marc.
Maybe just one point, just to add on Uwe, what you were describing. And I think maybe now taking a slightly outside-in view on reward, I think what really struck me was when you were at the end sort of outlining your business strategy and the objectives that I think the board has outlined for your organization, and then actually reflecting upon the potential that the tests that you have done to date, obviously, would still require the appropriate approval, might actually deliver the company's objective through a reward approach. And I think that is something that we need to really savor, is the connection, I think, Alex, to your point, right, that we have in terms of the asset and assets that we're responsible for, which is the compensation and all of the personal expenses that the organization is managing. We're supporting leadership in managing that, but we're also having a direct link to the strategy of a company, and thereby also having the opportunity to positively impact it, right? And I think that I found extremely, it just made it so tangible, what you outlined. So I think it's
Maybe one thing to add to that, because probably my biggest takeaway from today's discussion, I think the one big thing we struggle with is exactly this point. How do you translate what we do into measurable outcomes that are not only relevant for rewards or for HR, but for the business? And how do you translate that, and how do you actually measure it, and then how do you measure the impact, the portion that you can actually explain through the intervention you made? And I
To
think
an executive team.
To an executive team, exactly.
That was the interesting thing about what you
kind
did.
of the question, why do you do what problem are you trying to solve? But then also, how are you actually proving that it solves something? And that's important for us to exchange on and test on.
Yes, and maybe also challenging ourselves. We think a lot of what we do is imperative and important, but it's also good to pause and understand, what is the value of this to the business? Yes. And I think then it becomes easier to sell these tests, these projects, if we can put ourselves in the shoes of the business. I think it was good that we were challenged, and every time we talked about a problem or a hypothesis, to also think about what could prove it wrong, and how we could position it to the business, or put a business lens on it, not just an HR or reward lens.
Right, because we get wrapped up in our own work.
If it doesn't work, we cannot operate in a silo, because it will never land. It won't land. Or we could spend a year on a project, 3 years on a project. And if we don't bring the business along with us, it lands on deaf ears, and it's for nothing.
Great.
So it's really important.
Olaf.
Yeah, to summarize what you all said, I think the point is that reward is an extremely visible function, internally and externally. And whatever we do, whatever we change, might create a lot of noise, internally or externally. And that's why many of our colleagues shy away from changing anything, And this is totally understandable. But if you do it smart enough, and you gave a good example, and if you have in mind how that supports the business performance, I think that is the art. So what we did, and I talked about that last year in one of the labs, we introduced an AI-augmented chatbot, which answers for every employee questions around our equity compensation plans. And that took away 60% of the question workload for my team and HR, which we then could use differently, or be more efficient or whatever. And that had a direct bottom line impact. So, and as long as you can prove that, I think it's easy. In Is it simple? It's not. But if you can translate what you do into business performance impact, that's, I think, where the trigger lies.
So coming back to Uwe, what you said earlier about the skill of diagnosing, what's the value of reward professionals, right? You diagnose, you use the toolkit, and then you can communicate it to key stakeholders, right? Because that is clearly coming out from what you're saying.
And Ben, maybe just to add just one more point to it, I think we talked a lot about database management. You actually made that point before. It's about not just you use data to make decision make, right? But you also use science actually, and this is what a bit what testing actually does. So we're starting to actually combine different areas and different ways to come up with solutions for the business, and that's actually very important. So when as work we often too much into, from my perspective, it's all about we have to have more data, and if we have the right data, we can make the right decisions. We also have to learn a little bit from academia and from what we used to do at university. We forget that actually. And this is the power. Yeah. No, but I think this is a power a bit for the TR2050, to be honest, because we actually have the business and academia. And so we have real practitioners and we have academics helping us to actually try and frame the thought. And because of that, we can actually start to add some real value to our organizations. And that's why that's what differentiates us a bit. And I think it's quite important because in the end, it's about differentiation, right? That's for all of us, for our companies. If we can differentiate ourselves, we can differentiate our company, a better employee value proposition, we win the end game.
What's our competitive advantage? Because I'm bringing this powers together into one micro economy of reward professionals. Yeah.
So first of all, just to let me echo what I said to Uwe after he gave us that presentation of his test. I said, it's really interesting because lots of people obsess about data-driven decision-making. And I said, what you're doing isn't just data-driven, it's scientific because you're establishing cause and effect. You're testing your mental model. So you've gone beyond that. And the other thing I want to say, Uwe, again, I didn't bribe him to say that. So thank you.
Not much anyway.
Not much. Great. Let's come back to a topic you've already touched on. So this personalization versus simplification. So you'll remember and Raluca, you watched the video, right? We talked a lot about this 3 years ago, right? One of our core debates, where are we? Have we gone further? And you've touched upon this already. Have we gone further or has the pendulum swung back? I'm going to start with you, Marc. Where are we now on this topic of personalization versus simplification?
So I think we've touched upon it a little bit already earlier on, right? I think the aim for the simplification and the desire is as vibrant as it was 3 years ago today. And I think the needs for, and certainly from speaking to our executive team or executives is, make it understandable to colleagues. Independent, right? Executive leadership team members through to shop floor individuals or to sales teams, right? And at the same time, I think there's still also the desire of us as individuals to have something which is personal. And so it's that tension which continues, right? So from my perspective, I don't think that we've advanced, but it continues, and it is not something that we have necessarily, let's say, moved the needle in one direction or the other, but we're moving forward and continuing to evolve the topic of both personalization as well as the desire or the need for simplicity when it comes to what we're offering to employees.
Has the business environment, I'm thinking about, in 23, we were 2-3 years out of the pandemic. There was a whole working from home. We need to keep, millennials, Gen Z happy. Has the business environment changed how we treat employees? Or is this just, do you not see it as changing it? And therefore, the desire to...
And it's maybe not a specific reward, but I think the pendulum, at least from what our vantage point is that when it comes to, let's say, the hybrid work is that certainly for manufacturing organizations, it's going more back to sort of pre-pandemic setups, meaning that the desire of having individuals come back to the office or the site or the team being together is let's say,
You're swinging back to that versus the personalization.
Versus the personalization, right?
Right.
So I think that's something which probably is more going away from the personalized, but it is also making it maybe a little bit more simple, right, for an organization. But again, that's why from my perspective, I think it's an evolution. We're still moving in the same direction of having that tension between simplicity and personalization when it comes to HR programs. And I would argue even from a reward side.
I would agree with what Marc just said. So when we met 2023, that was still post-COVID. And we thought that work arrangements, will evolve and develop and be much more diverse than they used to be. But that has not materialized. So what I see, and that's what you also said, Marc, that the pendulum swings a bit back. Yeah. So even in our organization, it's back to office majority of the time. Yeah. We haven't seen an increase in gig workers compared to what we have expected it to be. So I don't see that personalization is as hot of a topic as it used to be 3, 4, 5 years ago. What I can see is much more going back to a simplification, partially also standardization, just to keep it manageable. So that was an assumption back then, which didn't fully materialize.
And it's interesting you mentioned gig workers again as another thing we talked about that maybe hasn't quite materialized the way we thought it might. Raluca.
I think in my view, what has shifted is from personalization to flexibility in a broader sense, because people want, I believe employees basically want explainability, clarity, simplicity creates that in theory, right? But they also want some sort of choice, but not too much choice. So individualizing everything is maybe taking it too far, and that's why I personally haven't seen that trend if we talk about personalization, like of benefits, of working setups and so on, having gone too far. So I think, but the flexibility, I do think that we're swinging back to pre-pandemic from work arrangements standpoint. But flexibility, I do believe, has changed versus pre-pandemic. There is more flexing there for people to reflect their different life arrangements, life phases, needs, and so on. That used to be much more strict before.
It's interesting you said that about keeping it simple for the employees. Olaf and I were talking just before about the paradox of choice. So we think people want lots of choice. If you give them too much choice, remember the marmalade study, they actually don't like it, right? They're paralyzed, exactly, paralysis of choice. So it's a really interesting observation, Raluca. Uwe.
I can only agree with what's Sagan. I mean, maybe for me, it's actually not personalization anymore. It's actually more segmentation. I think when I look at the workforce, I think we look a lot in terms of what kind of segments that we're dealing with, and then we're trying to make solutions for segments to keep it simple, actually. Because I think personalization in itself is inherently very complex. I think also it's not just companies and people, it's also, to be honest, the world economic situation that we're facing has actually contributed a lot to taking the pressure away actually from us to drive that way. Yes. And I mean, I'm thinking about, as you said, we had COVID and people were working from home. Then there was this discussion about I want to work from anywhere. I mean, that also has kind of disappeared a little bit. Yeah. So I think that the pressure kind of is ceasing, and I mean, governments are working against that. So tax legislation is becoming more stringent than it was before. Corporate tax legislation is actually forcing companies to consider where do they place employees. So I think actually the world has shifted a lot in 3 years, to be honest, since 2023. That has a direct impact actually on what we have to do in compensation and benefits to be relevant to our people, to the segments of our people. That's how I guess that's how I see it. So I completely agree with we're moving back from personalization, much more to simplification.
Alex.
I think reflecting on everything everyone has said, I would build upon two ideas: the idea of segmentation and the idea of flexibility. I like what you said about companies sort of finding now a compromise, a middle ground between what was maybe fully remote to being fully back in the office. I think the idea of being fully remote was attractive and interesting, but posed great challenges for companies that they just were not ready to manage. I mean, like in terms of culture, in terms of, for some companies in production, having half of their workforce needing to be in production on the floor, and half of the knowledge workers having the luxury of being at home, created tension within companies. You had people who were working from anywhere, creating complexities around how much do we pay them. Having people on a Swiss or German salary working in a lower cost country, all of a sudden realizing, okay, this doesn't work. This is creating inequalities we also cannot manage. I think reeling that back in has been really helpful for companies to manage some of these risks and to create some structure around maybe finding a middle ground.
And it's interesting, the business environment, I think, has helped companies with that, right? So, yeah, it's made it easier.
I think so.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, great. Thank you. I want to come back to a topic that you've already mentioned, but I want to get your views on this, just because I think it's worth delving into this. Technology and AI. So we did talk about this 3 years ago. What's actually changed? Lots of hype, lots of chatter. As far as you can tell, what's actually changed? Raluca.
I think what has materially changed is how we're able with technology to make sense of our data much better. So like if I look at what's happening in the pay transparency and pay equity area, the tools that are out there, I think that wasn't there in that shape and form or 3 years back. Beyond that, I think there's specific things happening in like job architecture wise, job leveling, how do you use AI to kind of make sense of all the data that's out there, the structures you already have, and help you kind of scale them or help you be more efficient and at running some processes. I think those areas are changing. In a sense, what I'm not seeing yet is true replacement of particular tasks or particular roles or particular jobs at least not so there's a difference here, right? There's a difference if you look at total rewards professionals as such. No, that's one area. Versus if you look at the entire workforce. Of course, there's changes in the entire workforce to some extent, and some processes being completely redefined, certain jobs becoming obsolete or changing to a pretty extreme extent due to AI. But if you look at total rewards professionals and what they do, I'm not sure that it's been revolutionized through technology.
Nice example. Just to summarize what you're saying, do you remember we talked in the lab about the difference between reimagining the work versus making it more efficient?
Yes.
And you're saying certainly in total reward, at least, it's more in the last second bucket.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Excellent.
But we're learning more about it. I think it compared to 3 years ago, companies like Swiss Re, we had a fantastic presentation this afternoon about how Swiss Re is leveraging AI and how they're challenging processes, reimagining how to do their work. And that sort of challenges all of us to kind of reflect on, okay, how are our organizations getting prepared? Are they not? Where does that leave us? And I think with some of these more courageous sort of leading companies showing us what you can do with AI, that we didn't have 3 years ago.
I think that is the key point, Alex. I think what has changed actually, not just for us, but probably also broader, is the way we look at technology. It's no longer the question, using technology as like a search engine or doing certain process steps for you. It's looking at technology from end-to-end basis. How can we re-engineer our process landscape, not only, but also in rewards, and make best use of AI? And I think there are hundreds of use cases out there in theory which you can tackle with that, whether it's benchmarking, pay ranges, predictive pay, annual comp cycle. I think we are only at the very beginning of that journey, and there's much more to come. And the ambition clearly within our organization is to look at technology end to end and ask, how can we run the annual comp cycle using AI best as we could? And that will, I think, change quite a bit the way we work as a company, as HR, as reward in the years to come.
What I loved about your Olaf, your colleague Vasco's presentation was, and again, close to our heart, right? Ideas to evidence, right? Really cool idea. Let's go and test it. Is that actually true, or is it just, is it viable? You talked about minimum viable products. So I love that. That was great. Uwe, thoughts on this?
I mean, for me, if I reflect back on 3 years, I think AI has developed faster than I thought it actually would, to be honest. It's gone, I mean, the way that people use AI now is just amazing to see how people augment their work and do data gathering faster. But on the other hand, on the flip side of it, what you actually said before, it hasn't replaced anyone yet. So what we all feared was going to happen, that hasn't accelerated at all, actually, because what's happening is we still need to use what AI actually produces, make use of it and frame it in such a way that it's actually valuable to the organization. And that AI can't do for us, that we need to do, and we need time to absorb that and to actually work with it. So they're the two flip sides of technology to me, actually. On one hand, it is actually really speeding up and making data available and consolidating it and summarizing it and putting it into nice PowerPoints and Word documents and whatever. But it also gives us a challenge that we need to decide what to do with it and how to actually, but Olaf, what you said, the end-to-end part of it, right? How do we end-to-end now get value from AI? And it hasn't become any easier, to be honest, than 3 years ago to actually come to a conclusion, because it's, in the end, it's a business case for me. So how do we actually create something that's of value to the company from what is actually being created through AI? So that challenge, I think we're grappling with in my organization. I think we're all grappling with it. And I think it'll take us time to do that, actually. So I think this is what's changing for technology for me. It's a super interesting journey.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
So here is where it'll be interesting to see what we will say 3 years from today about this, considering, right, the tremendous speed that we saw in the evolution over the last 3 years, especially in regards to AI, right? I think that for me is something that is going to be super interesting.
What my last question is. So great point. And just on that, it's really interesting. You observe the rapid change. If you look, and AI is potentially different from other technological innovations, but if you look at every other technological innovation we've had over the last 150 years, the one pattern we can see is that whatever we predicted at the beginning is not what was actually used for at the end. And it took longer than we thought in almost all cases, right? So it's fascinating. Again, I will be asking you at the end of today, and I might be asking in 3 years' time as well. Great. I want to move to a different topic, which is fairness, trust, and transparency. Has transparency improved, or is there more tension now? And think of some of the other topics we've been talking about, right? Specifically technology, right?
So to me, it's interesting, building on the AI discussion we had. I think this is one thing that with AI has indeed shifted in terms of Transparency, yes, we have compliance requirements, but at the same time, with AI, transparency into the black box of rewards, whether an organization makes a conscious decision to open it up, to explain, and so on, the black box is actually opened, right, with AI, because employees and anyone out there, right, has access to data, whether it's right or wrong, whether they understand it or not. They believe they do, right? Yes. So there's assumptions floating, there's expectations floating of employees are much more proactively requiring, right? Transparency, explanations, clarity, all of that, and they believe they know. I think that's, to me, is a new tension, because before, rewards was kind of this space that, of course, a lot of people had an opinion about, no, but it was more complicated to grasp.
It was a black box.
It was a black box, right? And I feel like what's happening now, there's a lot more people assuming that they understand how it works, that they know what it's like, that they know what Swiss Re pays because AI gave them an answer, right? And that is a risk that needs to be proactively managed, in my view.
I don't know, I think it's also an opportunity. It is. It opens the door for asking ourselves, how do we want to be educating the business proactively about some of these topics? Education was a common theme in a lot of the topics we covered today.
Yes.
And I think with all these risks, there are opportunities to reflect and go, why are we here in the first place? Probably because we didn't do enough to think about what topics, even generally, that we want to educate our managers about.
I was going to say, educating at least 3 different communities, right? Employees, managers who communicate to employees, and then senior leaders.
And HR, and frankly, HR. Because I was at HR, because even then, I would actually argue at the moment, my HR is a huge focus for me. Because often they are the first point of contact for our line managers. And so making sure they understand LTI and they understand the more technical aspects of benchmarking is so important. Yeah.
Right, great.
Okay. I can only echo what was said, and I think it's important to remember that, I mean, just because you can see the data doesn't mean you actually understand it. And I mean, I do that when I look at a car manual, how to fix my car. I mean, I can read the manual, but it doesn't mean I can actually fix my car. And it's not so similar with actual comp data for me. People see comp data and actually make a conclusion based on it because they think they have all the data actually in hand. And I think, Alex, what you said is 100% correct. It's about educating and actually trying to make sure that people understand what the comp data also means. This has become so much more crucial now, actually.
And trusting them with it, trusting that they'll get there. I think, managers and HR, we're not children, we're curious humans. They want to know and learn more about reward too. And I think we need to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's okay to differentiate. I mean, this is what, in organizations, or in my organization also, the question is always with transparency coming up. Is it the death of differentiation, or pay differentiation? And of course, it should not be. I mean, we want to differentiate if this is what our segments actually would like us to do, if this gets us the right results. But we have to explain now why we differentiate, and we have to explain how we differentiate. And this, maybe in my mind at least, this increase in transparency will actually lead to a vast improvement in terms of how we do compensation and benefits, how we look at reward. Because now we have to explain it, and we have to explain it so people understand it. And that's why simplicity, coming back to simplicity,
makes it easier.
Otherwise we can't explain it. So we come a bit full circle actually in this.
I think it becomes almost the rebirth of simplicity again, right? If I can say so, right?
Reminding you.
Because now you need to your point, right? We really need to ensure that leaders, managers are able to articulate it, HR colleagues are able to articulate it, and that employees are able to understand it. Right? And I think this is where the simplicity comes in, but also where it's triggered through the transparency. And so, yeah, again, it goes back to, I think, also what we earlier had mentioned in terms of leadership and the opportunities that leaders offer, the same way that managers, play a key role in this as well.
So if I can summarize your discussion, Transparency is going to happen whether it's through regulation or technology, right? I'm going to add a little bit to what you said. It's both a threat if you don't get ahead of it, but it's also an opportunity if you get ahead of it, specifically by keeping it simple and communicating with relevant stakeholders. Yeah. Okay. Let's get to our final question, the easiest question there is. Okay. Let's look forward to 2029. Okay? What is the biggest shift that you think might happen that we are underestimating today? And Olaf, I'm going to come back to you as our host.
Thank you, Ben, for the tough question.
For the gift.
So
what do you think?
Clearly, I think the biggest shift we will see in the next 3, 4, 5 years will be around technology, will be around the technological development, the implementation of tools within our organizations, within human resources, and within reward. We don't know how that will clearly, play out, but I think the impact AI and similar tools will have on the way we work, on the way we run our function, on some elements like, transparency and the like will be significant. How that looks like concretely, we'll see, but I think that will be the biggest impact in the foreseeable future.
Right. Great. Alex.
In my view, I have a sense, an inkling that the function of rewards will also become more strategic as technology advances. And I think the transparency, as that black box sort of unfolds, we will need to be able to guide the business, to advise them, to consult HR, to help them navigate what is unknown. And I think that there we need to then rise to that challenge and be able to also continue to educate, continue to challenge ourselves that we are ready, and also make sure we fully understand our business strategy, and how the rewards, incentives, and performance and all that jazz helps the business achieve ultimately its objectives, and be able to advise them on it as employees start pulling for more information.
So you're taking an optimistic view in that.
I'm from California. We're always glass half full, so I'm more optimistic. So
You have to be optimistic.
You have to be optimistic, yeah.
But strategic advisor both to the senior team,
Yes.
executive team, but also to HR.
Yes.
Right. So, and one of the things we talked about in the lab
Your true
today,
business partner.
right. And one of the things we talked about in the lab today was how reward is part of a bigger HR system. And that you're arguing, I guess, that that's going to become more important.
I think so.
Yeah. Great.
We'll see.
We'll see. Marc.
Was waiting for the next question. Next? No. Again, not to repeat, I think the element that I envisage over the next 3 years that will play a key role is the experience that we will be able to offer to candidates or to employees through the reward or the HR practices that an organization is offering. So it's both in terms of how we articulate it, how we design it, through to, I think, understanding the why and thereby having a positive experience, which hopefully will then underline the attraction from a candidate. I think we earlier spoke about differentiating each other also, all the way through to how we feel and are retained in an organization. Now, all of those words, right, retained and motivated and attracted are, 20, 30 years old, but I think they take on a significantly different meaning now, and will take on.
So the objectives are the same, but how you deliver it might be quite different.
And yes, how and the thought that you put in and sort of the method, and it's no longer here's your formula, but I think to Uwe's point, it's like, why are we doing this? How is this linking to the strategy? All right. We've said it in the past, but now we are articulating it. We're making the link. And that the candidate or the employee then actually says, okay, I buy into it.
I think to build on what Marc just said, I think to put it bluntly, I think the pressure on us will increase to show what value we are really adding, what value we are bringing. So in a world where, operational stuff will be done by, agentic AI or whatever, so people might say, show me your value add. What is it? If the annual cycle will be run by, by a bot, what are you doing? And I think that pressure will increase.
Okay, so great. It's the other way of saying this whole, you become a strategic advisor or you become...
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
So it's about creating evidence, I believe, on, what value does this bring to the business? How does it augment employee experience as well? Absolutely, I fully agree. It's kind of difficult to speak at the end of the discussion. For me, what I believe is going to change as well is how we actually make sense of what the business needs and what the flexibility within the framework we offer truly needs to be. No? And that's what you need to translate into, here's how I bring value to your business, here's how I bring value to the employees that matter within the business. So it's no longer one size fits all, other companies do it, but why does it make sense for us in our context, right here, right now, for the employee segments that we require?
Great. Uwe.
I want to go back maybe to a point that you made, Ben, before about the one HR. I think technology actually is going to drive a shift in HR that we're going to move much closer together, actually. I think this thinking of compensation and benefits, or reward as we call it, versus learning or leadership, or the more I actually work, and with the advent of AI, and as AI actually takes away some of these more menial administrative actually tasks that we do, we're starting to actually blur the lines between all of these different subsections actually in HR, which I think is great. So I think in the next 3 years, what we will see actually is value being created from the in-between the different sections, between reward and leadership, between development and reward. So it's not in our field anymore, it's actually in the adjacent fields to it actually, because we have the time through AI to actually focus on that, to collaborate, to create value for the business. So I think we're discussing this quite a bit in my organization, and I think this is where we will head in the next 3 to 5 years.
And this is something you discussed in the Stockholm lab as well.
We did,
when you were hosting us.
So when you mentioned that, actually, it just came back to me, and I actually thought it is this HR is shifting, actually. I mean, who we are as HR is shifting, and therefore who we are in reward also will shift within HR. It doesn't mean that our jobs will fall away. I honestly don't believe that.
They might change.
They change, and we will grow, and we will actually find things in between that we haven't thought of.
I see an echo here. It's really interesting. We will grow. I think it may not be, here's my prediction. It's not going to stay the same. It's either going to go down or go up. And this is about rewards leaders being leaders, right? In that sense of, do you want to grasp this, or do you want to just be taken along, dragged along by the change? So what I want to just to wrap this up, I want to pick up a Raluca, a word used, evidence. So, who knows what's going to happen in the next 3 years? You can tell what we're going to be, our approach, our recommended approach is we're not going to try and predict the future. We're going to take these great ideas and look for evidence, the scientific method, to try and unpick what actually is going to work. So with that, let me conclude by saying thank you very much, Alex, Uwe, Raluca, Marc, and finally, the greatest, Olaf. Thank you again for hosting us here. And thank you all for your great contribution, great conversation. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.